My sister won an apartment for $500,000 I got a mug. Yes, a mug. With a generic phrase and a crooked bow. But this story is not about the present. It's about what it symbolizes. A lifetime of being the daughter who endures, who gives in, who understands. A lifetime being forgotten. Hi, my name is Helena, and that's the story of how I stopped accepting crumbs and built my own feast. I was sitting on the living room couch with a polite smile on my face and a storm in my chest. It was my mother's birthday, and like always, I had done most of the work. I cooked, decorated the house, bought flowers with what little I had. My sister arrived last, like a star making her grand entrance. New dress, perfect makeup. And me, just a plain outfit and hands still smelling like garlic. But I never cared about shine. I didn't want to be admired. I just wanted to be seen, to be remembered, to be loved fairly. Since we were kids, it felt like the world revolved around my sister. When she got a C, she got praise and presents. I got straight A's and heard, that's your duty. If she cried, everyone rushed to her side. If I cried, they said I was being dramatic. That's how I grew up, watching her be celebrated while I was overlooked. It's not that I wasn't loved, but it was the kind of love that hides in the background. Tired love, conditional love, and over time, I learned to accept it, because asking for more only hurt more. That day, the house was full of relatives. It didn't happen often, but my mom loved throwing parties. In the middle of the celebration, my dad called for silence. "We have a special gift for each daughter," he said, eyes glowing with pride. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had remembered me with some kind of care. Something simple but thoughtful. Something that said, "We see you." He handed a box to my sister. Inside, the keys to a brand new apartment. "This is for our dedicated daughter and her bright future," he said. Everyone clapped. I just stood there, smiling on the outside, dying on the inside. My sister cried with joy, hugged our parents, said she didn't deserve so much. Then my mom turned to me with an awkward smile. "We have something for you too," she said. It was a small package, almost like an afterthought. I opened it right there, in front of everyone. Inside was a plain white mug with a generic phrase printed on it. "You're special." That was it. No note, no gesture, nothing that said, "We see who you really are." No one noticed, but my stomach turned. I forced a smile, thanked them, and swallowed the bitter lump in my throat. That moment, standing there holding that mug, everything became clear. It wasn't just a gift. It was a mirror, a summary of my entire life. I was the mud daughter, useful, practical, quiet, good for as long as I didn't break. Never a priority, always holding everything together in silence. After the gift giving, everyone went back to laughing, taking pictures, playing music. For them, nothing had changed. But for me, time froze. I kept thinking about all the times I skipped buying something for myself to pay a bill. All the nights I stayed up helping my parents. The times my sister took trips with money from the internship I found for her while I kept scrubbing the kitchen. And even then, they never saw it. They never saw me, the daughter holding up the house with her own hands. I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. The mug was still in my hand. I wanted to smash it against the wall. But I didn't. Because deep down, it wasn't about porcelain. It was about value. About old wounds no one else could see. About the constant feeling that I didn't even belong in my own family. It was about growing up begging for scraps of love. And worst of all, it was about starting to believe that maybe I didn't deserve anything more. I walked back into the living room with my head held high. I slipped the mug into my bag and sat quietly in a corner. I watched my sister laugh and wave the apartment keys like a trophy. And right there, in the silence of my heart, I made a promise. Not to them, to myself. That would be the last time I accepted crumbs. The last time I played the mug daughter. I would rewrite my story, even if it meant starting over from zero, alone, unseen, but finally free. Because sometimes, it's in the sting of rejection that we find the strength to be reborn. And me, I was about to find out that the best revenge wasn't smashing the mug. It was building my own table and choosing who got a seat at it. I learned to put my dreams on hold from a very young age. When my friends talked about college, I pretended to be excited, but deep down, I already knew I couldn't afford it. My parents were drowning in debt, barely keeping up with the bills. So I started working early, first as a babysitter, then in stores, then doing odd jobs from home, selling sweets, sewing clothes. Every penny I earned went to fix something broken in the house, to pay the power bill before it got shut off, or to buy my dad's medication. Meanwhile, my sister always had whatever she wanted. A brand new phone, designer clothes, graduation trips. When she said she wanted something, my parents made it happen. When I needed something, I figured it out myself. They said she was more sensitive and I was stronger. And they used that as an excuse to give me less, to expect more. Being strong became my sentence. No one looks after the one who holds everyone else together. I gave up prep school because my mom got sick, traded university for night classes at a technical school so I could work during the day and take care of the house. I never complained, never asked for anything in return. Deep down, I thought love was earned through sacrifice. I didn't want applause. I just wanted them to notice how hard I tried. But everything I did was invisible. They saw my sister shine. But the light I kept lit in that house, no one ever noticed. When my dad lost his job, I paid the bills for 6 months. When my sister lost her internship, guess who they asked for help with her rent? When I needed money to take an online course, they said, "Now's not a good time." And still I kept helping, because I truly believed it was temporary, that someday they'd see it. But time went by and nothing changed. That mug, in the end, just exposed the truth I'd been refusing to admit for years. I remember one Christmas when I managed to buy gifts for everyone, even with barely any money. I wrapped them with care, and I got a used planner for my sister. Scribbled on pages, a cheap ribbon. She laughed and said, "It's symbolic. You like to write, right?" I smiled, because that's what I'd learned to do, swallow my hurt and keep going. But swallowing too much starts to bruise you from the inside, and unspoken pain becomes silence, and silence becomes distance. The worst part was when people called me cold, said I didn't show emotions. No one saw that my quiet was a shield, that I had stayed silent for so long to avoid hurting anyone else. I forgot to care for myself. My sister could scream, cry, throw tantrums, and everyone rushed in to comfort her. When I cried, I heard, "Stop being dramatic." So I stopped talking, stopped asking for help, stopped hoping to be seen. I became a version of myself that nobody really knew. There was a time I dreamed of being an architect. I used to spend hours drawing houses and gardens, but they said that was a luxury, and I got the message. I tore up my sketches, closed my notebooks. I took a job in an office, gray, dull, repetitive, but the paycheck covered the bills, and I convinced myself that was enough. To this day, I still wonder what might have happened if someone had just believed in me. All my life, people asked me to bend, and I bent, asked me to understand, and I did, but when I finally needed to be heard, no one had time. No one had room. No one cared to listen. That's why the mug hit so hard, because it wasn't just a bad gift. It was the final answer. I had never been the priority. I was the support beam, the foundation, the staircase everyone else climbed to reach their dreams. And now, I was tired of giving, tired of being useful but never truly loved, tired of being told I was too mature for my age, when all I wanted was to be a daughter, not a caretaker. Tired of waiting for someone to say, "You've done so much. Thank you." But deep down, I already knew. That day would never come. Not the way I hoped. And that's when it hit me. Either I changed the path, or I'd spend the rest of my life being the background in someone else's story. After the party, my sister made a point of showing me every detail of the apartment she'd just been given. "I want to show you everything, sis," she said, glowing with excitement, like she'd just won the lottery. And I went, because back then, I still hadn't learned how to say no. The place was brand new, Fully furnished, custom cabinetry, hardwood floors, a fancy balcony. It was spacious, bright, modern. A dream I once had for myself. But now it wasn't mine. It never had been. And maybe it never would be. That key in her hand wasn't just a gift. It was a cruel reminder. You weren't the one they chose. They said it's their way of encouraging me, she giggled, twirling in the living room. They believe in my future. They said it's an investment. I smiled politely, but inside, every word felt like a knife. And me? What was I? A bad investment? Too risky to bet on? A project they gave up on? My sister, with her past mistakes brushed aside and debts quietly covered, now held the deed to a $100,000 apartment. And me? I was still sharing a moldy room and sleeping on an old mattress. It was impossible not to compare, and impossible not to hurt. In the kitchen, there was a sign on the wall that read, "Home is where the heart is." And right then, I understood what I was missing, a place to call my own. Not for the walls, not for the luxury, but for the dignity, for the sense of being worthy. I used to dream of a little house with a plant in the window and a desk where I could write out my thoughts. But I never had any of that, because every time I had even a little left over, there was always a bill, an emergency, someone else's need. And now, seeing all this handed to someone who'd never sacrificed a thing, it wasn't just unfair. It felt like I didn't even exist. What hurt the most was hearing my parents justify it. "You're already stable. You've got a good head on your shoulders," my mom said. "Your sister needs more help." They said it like I was some wealthy overachiever, as if my so-called stability hadn't come from sleepless nights and silent tears, as if being the one who didn't ask for help meant they had the right to ignore me. That's when I realized, in their eyes, I didn't receive because I was too strong to need anything. But even strong people have a breaking point, and mine was right on the edge. I couldn't stop thinking about that apartment for days. It was like it followed me home. Every corner of my own house, cramped, noisy, dark, reminded me that, to them, I was never someone who deserved more. And the mug was still sitting there on my nightstand, like a cruel little trophy, a $20 reminder that my life had been reduced to a mass-produced phrase. Sometimes I stared at it and thought, is this really all I'm worth to them? A mug? A half-hearted gesture to quiet my disappointment? That's when all the old promises started echoing in my head. When things get better, we'll help you too. Once your sister grows up, everything will be more balanced. But time passed, and I kept being the silent pillar. No one ever said that apartment was meant for me. But their silence, their total exclusion from that decision, was louder than a no. It wasn't just being passed over. It was rejection dressed up as fairness. Abandonment painted to look like reason. My sister invited me to spend the weekend at her new place. Said it'd be fun, that it was our place too. And as much as I wanted to believe her, I knew better. That key wouldn't open anything for me. I was just a guest, and there's no such thing as home when you need permission to belong there. I politely declined, said I was tired, but the truth, I didn't want to spend the night in a space that reminded me, with every breath, of everything I never had, of the recognition I'd never get. That night I cried quietly, not out of jealousy, but grief. A deep, heavy mourning for everything I'd given, everything I believed, every birthday, holiday, and sacrifice I made thinking that one day someone would notice. No one did. No one wanted to. And maybe that's worse than being forgotten. Because I was remembered just as the one who could handle it, the one who would figure it out, the one who didn't complain, the one who always understood, until the day I stopped understanding and started listening to myself. It was sometime around dawn that something shifted in me. I looked at the mug one last time, got out of bed, and wrote a single line in my notebook. I'm done being strong so others can stay weak. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next, but I knew what I wouldn't do anymore. And sometimes, that's where real change begins. Not with a plan, but with a wound that refuses to heal while injustice still lives. And me, I was ready to stop bleeding. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't make a scene, didn't raise my voice, didn't slam any doors. I just stepped back, slowly, like someone quietly closing a window so they don't wake anyone. On the outside, everything looked the same. I still replied to messages, still sent birthday wishes, still said, "I'm fine" when asked. But inside, something had shifted. The wound had become a scar, and the scar had turned into memory. And sometimes, when a memory hurts too much, it becomes a compass. I started looking at my life differently, and I realized that if I truly wanted change, I couldn't wait for it to come from them. I cut back on visits, filtered conversations, muted group chats. I used to show up to prove I cared. Now, I stayed away to prove I mattered. I started saying no more often. At first, it confused people. "You're acting different," they said. And I was. For the first time, I was saving energy for myself, using the time I once spent putting out other people's fires to build my own inner home. It felt strange, lonely, but also freeing. I started taking night classes, a basic design course offered by a nonprofit. Nothing fancy, but to me, it meant everything. It felt like relighting a long-lost flame. I remembered my childhood sketches, the floor plans I used to draw in secret at school. I remembered who I wanted to be before I had to learn how to survive. And in that quiet process, I started finding myself again, picking up pieces of the girl I once was and putting them back together, with care, patience, and courage. For the first time, I dreamed of having something that was truly mine. Not borrowed, not handed down, not a substitute. Mine. With what little I had saved, I bought a secondhand laptop. Then I created a social media profile. I started posting my work, interior sketches, simple layouts, mock-ups of spaces, all done at night after long shifts at my day job. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My hands, my lines, my vision. At first, no one noticed. No likes, no comments. But I kept going, because I wasn't doing it to please anyone anymore. I was doing it to exist, to prove to myself that I could still become more than what they saw in me. Eventually, small requests started trickling in. A friend asked for help decorating their living room. A distant cousin ordered a layout for a baby's nursery. The money was small, but the feeling? Huge. Because for the first time, I saw value in what I created. Not market value, but identity value. That was me on those pages. My ideas, my colors, my creativity. And no one could take that from me. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't a favor. It wasn't a pity prize. It was earned. Somewhere in the middle of that quiet rebuilding, someone asked me if I was still hurt. I said no, but that was a lie. I was. But I didn't let the hurt define me. I let it move me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. About walking away from a life where I'd spent years begging for recognition and never got it. About finally closing doors that were never open and building my own windows instead. The mug was still there, sitting on my nightstand. But now it didn't hurt as much. It reminded me where I came from, and where I never wanted to return. At one point, I thought about throwing it away. But then I realized I didn't need to. I just didn't need it anymore. It was just an object. I was the one who had changed. And when you change from the inside, what's outside loses its power to wound you. I had become someone else, not out of revenge, but out of love, self-love. The strangest part, when I pulled away, no one came looking. No one asked what was really going on. They accused me of being distant, of drifting from the family, but no one tried to understand why. And that just confirmed what I already knew. My worth had always been tied to my usefulness, never to my presence. Now that I wasn't available, I was inconvenient, and that was fine, because before I was invisible, and now I existed, and that was enough. I didn't have a master plan, but I knew what I wouldn't accept anymore. I knew I'd never again be the daughter they remembered only when it was convenient. I didn't know when or how, but I could feel it. Something was coming. Not a storm against them, but a storm in my favor. And this time, I wouldn't run to shelter anyone else. I'd stand in the rain, with my own steps, and maybe, just maybe, build something bigger than the apartment that was never meant to be mine. It was only when I stopped looking for support from my family that I began to see who was truly by my side. Simple people, but real. Coworkers who quietly complimented my work, saying my designs made them feel calm. A neighbor who saw my sketches taped to the wall and asked for help redoing her living room. Even a teacher from my night class who messaged me, "You've got talent. Don't give up." These small seeds of encouragement bloomed quietly and held me up when doubt nearly pulled me under. With the money from a few small gigs, I rented a tiny room downtown. I shared it with 2 other women who were also just starting out. It was cramped, nothing fancy, but that's where my little studio was born. I painted the walls white, taped affirmations to the mirror, and put a coffee maker near the door. It was mine, my space. For the first time, I had a corner of the world where no one saw me as the daughter who was supposed to understand everything, but as the professional who knew exactly what she was doing. And that meant more than any gift my family ever gave me. It wasn't easy. I had sleepless nights, days without clients, moments where I nearly gave up. But every time I saw a finished project and someone smiled and said, "That's exactly what I wanted," I remembered I was on the right path. I started gaining confidence. I dressed differently, spoke with more certainty, and little by little, I shed the version of myself that bent to fit inside other people's expectations. I didn't want to fit anymore. I wanted to grow. Then came my biggest job yet, designing the interior of a new cafe in the neighborhood. I poured myself into it. I added personalized touches, motivational quotes in the corners, even created a wall honoring women who had started over. When I delivered the final project, the cafe owner hugged me and said, "This place is soul." And for the first time, I felt like my soul was present too. I wasn't in the shadows anymore. I was the light. With the money from that project, I did something I dreamed of for years. I opened a savings account in my name, labeled my place in the world. Every month, no matter how little, I deposited something. It wasn't much, but each deposit was a quiet declaration of independence. I started researching small homes. Nothing big, just something with potential. One day, I found a rundown little house for sale. Old, almost forgotten, but solid. I fell in love. No one else saw the beauty, but I did. Just like no one had seen my worth before, until I learned to see it myself. I applied for a modest loan, used my savings, and signed the paperwork. I cried alone in my car afterward. It wasn't just a house. It was every tired night I'd worked, every no I swallowed, every tear I held back so I wouldn't seem weak. I had made it, with effort, with dignity, with silence, but also with courage. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself without needing anyone's approval. Over time, I transformed the house into a mix of home and studio. I created a reading nook in the living room, planted flowers in the yard. On the gate, I painted, "Here lives someone who chose to start over." My clients loved it. The space became known locally. A few small brands reached out. I formed partnerships, spoke at a design expo, and was invited to give a talk about women entrepreneurs. Me, the girl who once was just the daughter with a mug, now inspiring others to break free from invisibility. Ironically, that's when my family tried to reconnect. My sister sent photos of her apartment, saying she missed me. My parents asked why I didn't visit anymore. I replied kindly, but with boundaries, because now I understood. If someone only notices your absence when you stop serving, they don't deserve the center of your heart. And even though I missed them, I was no longer willing to lose myself for anyone. Because finally, I had found myself. The day I officially moved into my new home felt symbolic. I invited a few friends, made some coffee, put together a photo board with before and after pictures. And there, in the middle of my new life, I opened my bag and pulled out the old mug. I placed it on a shelf between books and potted plants, not as a symbol of pain, but of victory. The forgotten daughter finally had a home. The forgotten daughter finally felt seen by herself. And that was enough. The invitation came through the family group chat. My parents' wedding anniversary. 25 years. They sent it kindly, said it would be simple, just family, I thought about declining, but something inside me said it was time to go back. Not for them, for me. Not to prove anything, but to close the chapter. I spent days thinking about what to wear. Not to impress anyone, but to feel whole. I chose a light, flowing dress, something soft, like someone who'd survived the storm and now carried only peace. I grabbed my purse, and inside it the mug, that same one. The party was in the building where my sister lived, the one with the $100,000 apartment. I arrived on time, quietly. Some relatives looked surprised. "Wow, you look different," they said. And I did, but it wasn't the hair or the clothes. It was the look in my eyes. I didn't carry the weight anymore. I didn't ask for space, I took it. And that made some people uncomfortable. Because when you stop playing the side character, the ones who thought they were the star get confused by the new script. During dinner, my sister started showing photos from her upcoming trip with her fiancé. She said they were thinking about remodeling the apartment, maybe hiring a designer. An aunt chimed in. "Why not ask your sister? She's doing so well now." The room went quiet. My sister gave a half laugh. "Oh, I don't even know if she still does that stuff," before the conversation could move on. I calmly reached into my purse, placed my card on the table, and said I still do. In fact, I've just partnered with 2 cafes and gave a talk at a design expo last week. The table went silent. For the first time, they actually heard me. After dinner, everyone started giving gifts to my parents. Flowers, picture frames, little keepsakes. I stood up, walked to my bag, and pulled out the mug. The same one. I had placed it in a nice box with a red ribbon. When I handed it to my mom, she smiled, not understanding. "It's symbolic," I said. "This mug taught me more than any book. It reminded me of my worth, of how I needed to stop waiting for approval from you all and start building my life for myself." My dad just looked at me, silent. No one said a word. There was no fight, no tears, no applause, but I saw it in their eyes, a flicker, a mirror. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging to be seen. They were the ones who didn't know where to place me anymore. Because I had outgrown the mold. I had grown on the outside, healed on the inside, and now they couldn't shrink me back into the role of the quiet daughter. I wasn't my sister's shadow anymore. I wasn't the silent support beam of the family. I was me, whole, present, real. Before I left, my sister came up and tried to make small talk. "I'm happy for you. Really." And I thanked her. No sarcasm. Because I didn't need her to understand anymore. I just needed her to respect me. And in that moment, she did. As I stepped into the elevator, I felt something lift from my shoulders. Like the old version of me had stayed behind, upstairs. With the mug. And with all the expectations that would never bind me again. I rode home in a cab, resting my head against the window, my heart completely calm. This wasn't about revenge. This was about freedom. About returning what once wounded me with dignity and turning it into a symbol of growth. Life had taught me to live with little, but now I knew. It was never about what they gave me. It was about what I built from it. And I had built a home, a name, a peace, with myself, and with everything I had left behind. Now, when I look back at my journey, I realize that sometimes you have to lose what you never truly had just to finally gain yourself. I didn't need an apartment. I needed courage, faith, strength, and those no one could ever take from me. Because unlike a set of keys, dignity isn't handed to you. You earn it. And when you build a place where you can be fully yourself without asking permission, that place is worth more than any inheritance. And if anyone asks what happened to the daughter with the mug, tell them she learned to raise her glass alone. And these days, she drinks her coffee in peace. Inside the home she built herself, with the same hands no one applauded, but that held up everything until now. If you like this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and if you want to help me keep telling these stories, you can buy me a coffee. The link is there in the first pinned comment. Every cup helps me keep bringing you more stories.